This is the INKPULP Podcast.
Yeah, what the buttons do.
All right, we're
We're
recording.
in that space now,
Don't
man.
bring yourself down to my level. This is
You
new
just
to
gotta
me.
hit the record button, everything starts working.
Okay, I'm recording, and I see it recording. Okay, we're good. All right, so I don't have welcome to the INKPULP Podcast. This is the first experimental
It's absolutely experimental.
version of what my podcast is evolving into next. Eric, you've been here since day one,
Mm-hmm.
and you've seen it evolve into many different forms. But I think
Devolve.
devolve. You've seen it fall apart and then fall apart again.
No, I mean, yeah, I'm glad that, speaking quite selfishly, I'm glad that we had this conversation 2 weeks ago, right? Like, hey, what can we do so that we'll have an opportunity to just chit chat about primarily craft, right? Because that's the kind of stuff that you and I end up talking about anytime we get together someplace anyway.
For sure.
But again, quite selfishly, I look at this as an opportunity for you and me to just get on a call every more consistently than we did during the quarantine times, right? Where we just
Right.
kind of put our heads down and try to get to work on stuff. You with your lessons, you with your .com efforts, and me with my mini series, right? With my crowdfunding series. So
Right.
I think this is sort of a good way to get back into the swing of things. You and I have what do we have? We have a couple conventions that we're going to end up doing soon, which is
For sure.
such a foreign concept to me now. The idea that, Jason Schachter, our art dealer, reached out to me and was like, hey, would you like to go do X, Y, and Z show? They want you guys to come and show up. And I'm like, that sounds like a weird thing that we don't do anymore.
You haven't done any since pre-COVID, right?
0%. 0%. My wife and I just recently had our second child. So not only was it, near impossible to go just because the nature of these shows weren't really, I don't know, I didn't feel like going into a space that I could almost, it felt like it was going to be forced being there. Like we were trying to make it work as most of these conventions were trying.
Right.
But I also, I mean, realistically, there was no way for me to excuse myself from responsibilities from home just so I can go to a convention. That wasn't very smart.
Sure.
Yeah.
I mean, that brings me back to when my kids were younger. You didn't have kids, and you were doing a whole bunch of shows, and always asking me, "Come, let's go do this one and this
That's
one."
right.
And I
That's right.
wanted to do all of them, but I
Yeah.
couldn't.
Yeah. No, I think, it's funny how there's so much more. I mean, this is obviously hindsight, but I would remember those times when you would say, dude, I can't go because, X, Y, and Z family reasons. And that was when either I was still single or just, early into my relationship pre kids. And I can't stand those glasses. I can't stand those glasses. But you're going to wear them because it's your podcast. So I'll stick around, I guess. But I can't stand those glasses, man.
Why don't you like them, Eric?
I don't.
Look, you're sitting. You're lit so well. You've got a much better camera.
So this is like how you're gonna.
I'm just
Alright.
trying. I'm trying to.
So okay, listen. If I promise to send you a camera, can you not wear those glasses anymore?
Yeah, I'll do that.
All right, I'm gonna send you a camera just so I can never ever see those glasses
All right.
again.
Well, I'm wearing these glasses until you send a camera, then, and the
Alright.
audience can see how long this goes on for. And I'm happy with the glasses. I don't need the camera.
Clearly, you're happy with the glasses because any opportunity you can get, you bust them out every single time.
Wait for con season, Eric.
It's so annoying. It's so annoying. Speaking of con seasons, we might get an opportunity to be able to do these podcasts on the road. So I think this is kind of nice,
Yeah. In fact, I'm gonna want it. This camera that I got is so good. This new camera, I want to get another one too. And but yeah, even with one, we can do it. But we can do it with two. And there's an Mevo multi-camera app I can use on my laptop, and we
Yeah.
can really make it look good.
I was
You
I
won't
was
have
really
that
thinking.
fancy. You won't have your fancy setup though. Your
Yes, we can.
perfect
Because
lighting.
I was looking for a good excuse to buy this streaming box that you can bring anywhere with you and hook up a traditional camera similar to the one that we have here.
Are you serious?
Yeah, and all of these
Why?
cameras, these guys, there's a new wireless HDMI signal that you can hook up to the camera, hook up to this box, and we can pretty much put this camera anywhere in the room if we were to chit chat, just you and me, group of friends. There's multiple HDMI ports in this little tiny box. It's a
What is
nice little
the?
investment, but if we're gonna do a few more of these as the world opens up, so to speak,
Yeah,
might be a good might be a good thing to write off for later.
yeah. How much is that little box?
1200,
What's
something
it
like that.
called?
Shoot. I forgot, man. I'll send you the link after the show.
Okay,
Can
okay.
you tell that we don't necessarily have a format because this is like the first one? I'm sure we'll ease into it and find
Well,
even
Eric,
footing, but it's just
this
you and me
is
talking.
this is my podcast.
This is the
It's
format.
no, it's never been anything but this. Oh, that's not
No,
true. I
but
mean,
the different. No, exactly. I was gonna say you're not giving yourself enough credit because the first couple of times that over X amount of years that we would do this, there was a tradition that I would open up each new season of the podcast by
right,
being, episode 1 of 20, whatever that was. There
right,
was always a set of questions, or ultimately, I think if there was an umbrella of it was always you, sort of, looking through the lens of others as you're working stuff out for yourself, right?
right,
There's a
right. And I do have questions, and that's. I mean, honestly, as of the past year, my podcast has become very short episodes, 10 to 15 minutes in length, focused on giving academic content, like teaching
sure.
craft things, because ink pulp instruction is where a
That's
lot of my
smart.
energies are.
That's
So
smart.
I thought,
Congratulations, buddy.
oh,
That's really
thank you.
amazing.
But this seems like a good combination of everything, where you and I can talk, we can do the interview, we can talk about craft, and we
Yeah.
can bring back kind of what the podcast was and kind of make it something new and fresh too. So I like this idea. And when you texted me about it, I was in my head like I need something, because I just felt like there it was missing something. Something that I enjoyed about the podcast was gone. Not that I enjoyed what I was doing, but I think what helps my podcast succeed, part of that was missing. So I think this comes back to it.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
I'm
I
excited for that.
remember you were very sort of adamant about making sure that the majority of those podcasts were done person to person. Obviously, that got hamstrung because of the quarantine and everything. So this may be a nice proxy, but also, and if I may introduce the idea, I think there is this preconceived notion of like when you use the term podcast, it turns into something. You know, it
Right.
turns into this. I don't know what it is because I think there's so many successful, quote unquote, successful versions of these podcasts. There's always this preconceived notion that, oh, it must be this or it must be that. I guess format wise, it could, if you were to click the drop down menu on like these platforms, you would have to, categorize this as a podcast. But I don't know if it should be automatically handcuffed into that space. It's just a couple of guys
So you
talking.
think the umbrella term podcast kind of handcuffs it?
I think it sets up an expectation from an audience perspective, you know? But I don't
Do
know what
you?
I don't know. Maybe I'm being too narrow minded in my thinking because in my head this isn't too dissimilar from the different shows that I watch out there. That's a bit more on the longer format, which I think that's what we're aiming for with this, right?
Yeah, 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 yeah. Yeah,
Yeah,
but Eric, don't you listen to podcasts on like craft of filmmaking? They're
yeah.
like more
No, I
so
mean that's true. That's true.
I mean, I think what you're saying holds true if we were to have this conversation 5 years ago,
Oh, sure.
but I think a lot has happened. I think
Yeah.
COVID has the quarantine has made everyone um a- change their relationship with podcast media.
Mm.
So I think that the term podcast became a much broader term during quarantine. I think it was before that, but I think quarantine opened people up to all these different formats. From my perspective, the term podcast is a show of any kind, typically self produced.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
it can be an interview. It can be like I've done instructional stuff. It can just be someone babbling. Like I don't know. Do you consider like these video game streaming people? Do you consider their shows podcasts?
I don't think so. I think
Yeah,
they're just
that's a
like
good point.
streaming, you know? I think they're
Yeah,
just
that's
like,
different. They're streaming live.
yeah.
So does that change the term? I understand
Yeah.
what you're saying.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know. Again, probably it's more for me, not to think of it
Well,
that way. It's just,
look, do I need to change the name of the show now? Is
no, I
that
don't think
what
so. I think you're good.
okay.
I think I
Okay.
need to recategorize the umbrella that we're talking under to be like, that's the way Shawn has to think of it. I'm just gonna go talk to him like we're
Okay.
catching up.
Here, look at the screen. Let me ask you a question.
It's a me thing.
This, or this?
That's much better.
Yeah, I
Don't you
think so
think?
too. Yeah, I
Doesn't that
do.
feel
I do.
good?
Yeah, it feels much better. Well, I
Yeah.
mean, you and I are fans of the widescreen
What is
presentation.
this? 16 by 9? Just a
I
little
don't
bit shy.
it looks a little shy of 16 by 9, yeah.
Yeah. What's better than the squares that were like I felt like I
Yeah,
was in a freaking Brady Bunch opening, you know?
yeah. You know, Eric,
Yeah.
I've kind of painted myself in a corner, I just realized.
What'd you do?
I can't take off these glasses
Why?
because then I forfeit my our bet. I forfeit on that. But I see the glare in them and they're really bad.
I yeah, man. Beyond just the technical thing that is like bouncing off of those glasses,
Yeah,
I
all right.
suspect, yeah.
So look, it's episode 1. There you
You
go,
get a free
buddy.
pass, buddy.
There you go.
All right.
That
So what were we
that was
talking about when I texted you this? What was front of mind when we were texting back and forth? I know for sure I was sitting on the toilet while I was doing it.
well, you didn't tell me that.
Well, now I am.
Okay.
That's a bit of a confessional that I'm handing over to you. You take off your glasses, I give you something.
Okay. So you're asking me what the topic is today?
No, not necessarily. Like I was thinking about like what got us here, first of all, what sort of reignited or ignited the idea of starting to do this again. Because again, the format was different 3 years ago. The
Yeah,
format
yeah,
was
yeah.
you would
Mhm.
go town to town, you would go chit chat with a bunch of guys that you either knew, whose
Right,
art you like,
right,
combination of both, and
right,
you preferred it to be more, one on one, actually
right.
in
And so
person, because there was a lot of value to that.
yeah, I agree. Now,
Yeah.
that is another thing I think that has I don't know if I've just opened my mind more or quarantine has changed, but I felt like when I started the podcast, if I were to use Skype, which was the thing at the time, and this is
Mm,
over 10 years ago,
sure.
I think people's relationship with the computer was different than it is now.
That's a
So
good point.
to record a very intimate interview in that setting seemed very foreign when they'd be
Yeah.
distracted. But
Yeah.
I've consumed so much media this way now. We
Mm,
all have like you've got a really nice setup. I've got a good setup. We've got good mics and all that. And I don't feel distracted by looking into a computer, and I know you're not distracted by looking into a computer. So
no,
I
it's
think
been,
I've changed, and
mm,
we've all changed as well.
yeah.
I think quarantine
Yeah.
was part of it. I think, like, having, like, work meetings over Zoom over and over and over conditioned us
Yeah.
to treat this differently.
I mean, it's working in our benefit now, but generally that's kind of sad, right? Like the
Yeah.
situation by which we've been indoctrinated to be able to talk to a screen, to a simulation of an image of
Mhm.
somebody so that we can find some context, some level of connection with the person on the other end. I think one of the things that I thought was of high value, and it's not to diminish the conversation that we're having now, one of the things of high value, and I really appreciated your sort of adamant stand on it, was that you wanted to be able to talk to people face to face because there's just that sort of, I don't know what it is. Maybe it's like the interaction. It doesn't mean that our interactions are disingenuine, right? It's not lacking in authenticity. But I think when you're in
Right.
the room with somebody, and especially in your case, because you always manage to introduce alcohol into the situation, like it just feels looser. You know what I mean? Like
Sure.
there is a thing. This does go to what you were talking about, which is when we got accustomed, by we I mean like the people in general got accustomed to doing this version of interaction. I think that they started understanding how to be this version of themselves, right?
Right.
But if you
Right.
were to do this 10 years ago with somebody, like they'd be looking up here or something like that. You know what I mean? They'd
Right.
be like they
Totally.
wouldn't necessarily know how to conduct themselves in front
Totally.
of a camera. Technology being what it is, camera technology being what it is, that also I think adds to a better simulation of interaction, right?
I agree.
Yeah.
Also, I do think that I noticed recording
How's this
podcasts
mic,
will.
by the way? Is this all right?
Yeah, your mic is great. Do I
Technically,
sound
I'm
okay?
supposed to be like, yeah, you're fine. Yeah.
Do I need to be closer like this? Do I need to hold the mic like I'm.
I don't think so. But this one in particular is really finicky because
Yeah,
this
but
is
when
one of
you're up
those.
on it, it sounds amazing. I don't know
Yeah.
what mine sounds like.
No, you're fine.
Okay.
You're the area by which your mic is able to pick up a signal is built specifically for you to be about 3 feet away. This thing, as good as it sounds when I'm like a fist away to the side of my mouth, that's a sweet spot of this microphone. And I sometimes I lose track of that, so I've got to be really up on it, like I'm eating
Okay.
like a Dole Whip.
Eating a what?
Have you heard of Dole Whip? How long has it been since you've gone anywhere near Disneyland or Disney World?
Oh shit, a long time.
There
My
you go.
kids
I
were
know
much
that's a
younger.
bad reference.
But even
I could
then,
have
I don't recall
I could have gone more lewd, but instead I decided I would say frozen, frozen
eating.
yogurt ice cream.
Well, we can go lewd. This is our show now. But I'm gonna say, in going back to what you were just saying, the type of interview I conducted in
Yeah,
when it was Ink Pulp Audio,
yeah,
I still think works better in person.
I
This
agree.
new thing we're doing, well, first off, you and I are so familiar with each other,
That's the other thing I was going to say, but continue. Go ahead.
um, so for what we're doing, talking craft, talking shit, and maybe having a friend on here and there, um, this is fine. I think
Yeah,
there's an element of performance when, like, I feel like I'm in a recording studio. I've got a camera on me, a mic in front of me. When I
right,
would record the podcast in the room, when
right.
there was no video, first of all, and
Yeah,
it was just a microphone, I can't tell you how many times the guest would say, "Oh my god, I forgot we're recording."
yeah, that's great.
And that was great. But
Yeah,
that's what that show was about. It was about more of a personal, intimate interview style show. I think
sure,
this will be
sure.
different, and
Yeah,
it
yeah,
not in a worse way, in a good way.
yeah. I think I think that first of all, you're absolutely right. I think that there's our level of familiarity allows us to just be like, this is just me and Shawn on a Tuesday. You know what I mean? Like it's this isn't any
Mhm.
different than if we're in the same room with each other, and just catching up or whatever. I
Right,
think that when people are keenly aware that there's a microphone interface, right, whether it be like the one you're using or the one that's built into their computer or whatever it is, right, and there's a camera on them, it's an added level of awareness that the old podcast sort of faded away once the
right,
talking started going, right?
right.
I remember, where were we? I was just talking to Shachter about this yesterday. We were in that really posh, room that he had. Do you remember that? Was that Houston?
With Tim and the time we recorded
Yeah.
with Tim and Klaus, that was
Yeah.
Denver.
Yeah.
That was Denver.
Oh, Denver. Okay. Yeah.
Uh-huh.
So I just remember being in that room and, the moment you hit the record button, it just went back to all of us just chit chatting.
Right, right,
Nobody was sitting there looking for their opportunity to speak. It's just the way we talk with each other when we're sitting at the table. Tim is very deliberate and measured when he injects himself into a conversation.
yeah.
So I remember it being exactly like that. And then the other time that was really notable to me, not just because of the locale, that was a beautiful room that Jason had, that piece of shit.
Well, yeah, he always gets that upgraded room.
I know, man. I don't know how that guy rolls. But anyway, so that was memorable, not just because of the situation that we were in. Like, what was it? Like 3/4 of the room were windows. Remember that? We're
Yeah,
overlooking the city.
yeah,
But it was also great because I'd never sat in a room doing that kind of a show with Tim Sale. And to hear Tim
right.
just talk about what we were talking about, I can't remember the subject matter, but I just remember how great it was to just have him talk. you know?
Yeah, well, for me, it was huge because I'd never had Tim on my podcast, and he had listened to my podcast and
Right,
enjoyed it.
right.
Um, and I'd never spent any time with Tim. I mean, he was always at shows, but
Yeah,
Tim always has such a big line, and he's surrounded by people.
right,
And
right,
I wasn't familiar with him like, say, you and Mateo were, so I was a bit intimidated. Like, and I was that way with Klaus too before I met
right on.
Klaus. So
Yeah,
that was exciting for me to get Klaus, Tim, you, Jason, and me all in there.
yeah, yeah. The last one, the other one that I remember going like, man, we're just chit chatting now, but it's so weird to be doing this here. Is when we all went to Italy,
Yes.
right? And you set up in the middle. Well, it was in Bologna for sure,
Yeah, we were in
right?
the lobby of the
We were
hotel.
in the lobby, yeah,
Yeah,
and we were just sitting there talking like the way you are now.
yeah.
Obviously, in person, but we were in a freaking different country, and I can't remember what we were talking about. But you were this close to pulling out all your hair because of the noise levels of the room, and just like screw it, we'll just do it live, regardless of what we caught with the camera, with your
Right,
setup back then, or not with
right,
camera, the microphone.
right.
That
Well,
was
it was
pretty awesome. Those are two notable times when we recorded. I was like, wow, this is
yeah, and I
kooky,
wanna
man.
get back to that. I
Yeah,
mean, like, I'm working on building a setup, like I mean, you obviously are too, that we can roll with to shows and
yeah,
trips and stuff.
yeah,
So, I'm definitely looking forward like, we'll get back to that for sure this year.
yeah.
Um,
Well, I kind of
that
want to have it for when you and I meet up at the next show.
Yeah,
That way
yeah.
we can stress test it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think I pretty much have it. I just have a single camera.
Yeah,
I have the laptop, I have mics that are USB, and we have StreamYard we can record on.
yeah, yeah.
I also have ScreenFlow I can record on too.
We have options.
Um, so the only thing I would and if I can get another camera, we can have multiple views.
Yeah,
Um, and then the app has a multi-camera option for the Mevo Cam. So
easy.
if I do get another one of these, I'll bring that. But I think I have everything I need to do it now.
Yeah, great.
So we'll do that. And I gotta get the intro at some point. I want to get a new intro for our what we're doing, and then I can actually like what Jason does when he starts his streams is we can talk some shit. Then I can hit the intro and it can come up and then
Very true.
Alan doesn't have to do anything after it's done. The intro's in it, and we just cut it off, and I can get it ready for release. There's no editing or composing that needs to be done, right?
Yeah,
I don't
yeah.
think so.
I don't know. I mean, this is our first one, so there's probably going to be things that we're going to be able to look back and go like, oh, we know how to optimize for that. But ultimately, I think one of the
Right.
victories that we can take away from this is that we're doing it again. You know?
Yeah, which is awesome. I've
Yeah.
been excited about this, and I'm excited to talk craft too.
Oh,
I'm very
right. We're
excited about
supposed to
that.
talk craft.
Well, I
What do
mean, I
we?
figured today would be an intro thing, but I did have
Yeah.
some craft things on board if we
Set
got
it up,
there.
man. Tee it up. Let's listen.
Well, I guess the first thing I wanna talk about is, your leap into the craft of writing and
Mm.
creating your own story
Yeah.
and what that journey's been like for you.
Um, I think if I were to take a measure with it, if I were to take a measure of it now, it's pretty exhausting, right? It's weird how if you step away from the table and look at the stuff that you've done, because you have that sort of zoomed out perspective, you're like, man, this is exhausting. But while I'm doing it, I'm not feeling any of that. So it's kind of operating on two weird levels, which is like I'm super enthusiastic about it, which I mean, ultimately I think what's great about it is that to me is a great sign, right? That
How
I'm
do you
doing it right.
maintain the enthusiasm if you're so exhausted?
I think it's because it's the difference between like running a race in which you're just like going through the motions of running and your brain is in a different space, right? Your heart rate escalates to an even pace, right? And now you're just running all the slow and fast twitch muscles are working in coordination with each other, and right, there's 26 miles, right? This is a marathon, right? But once you get to the end of the race and all of that stops,
I got you.
right?
I got
Like
you.
suddenly you look back and you think like, man, I just ran 26 miles, you know?
Right. Yeah.
It's
And the
something like that, something similar to that. It's a little clumsy,
the
also because my
re
phone went off. But like it's clumsy. But I mean, that's so to answer your question. How has it been? It's been exhausting, but also invigorating in the best way possible. And I think long term, it's one of the most invigorating thing, or it's one of the most worth it things that I can invest in. I mean, you have something similar by way of your instructional stuff, right? Like
Yeah, and that's
you,
that's kind of like where I was leading with that question. So I have I'm just beyond busy right now.
yeah,
Like I've grown in a considerable amount over the quarantine, I'd say, but definitely over the past 6 or so months. Um Mainly I'd say in the past maybe 2 months something switched in me.
mm,
I was always like, when I look back at how I operated, I was always operating from this place of fear
mm,
that was motivated by lack of finances. And I
sure,
realized, like, everyone who knows me, that's all they ever heard from, not all they heard from me, but they
yeah,
heard that over and over and over. And at some point I was like, well, wait a minute.
yeah,
Maybe I'm just creating, like, I'm just nurturing
mm,
this financial
mm,
thirst, or not even nurturing it, but maintaining it
yeah,
by not changing my mindset on it.
mm, mm,
And I wasn't able to enjoy anything. I was nothing I did. Well, I shouldn't say nothing. Most of what I did was I was not in the moment. I didn't know how to be in the moment,
sure,
and all my work I was doing was hopefully getting me there. And lately, I realized, like, I would be so busy back then. I would just be stressed and
yeah,
unhappy, and I'd be
yeah,
at my table drawing just pressure and stress. And then I'd get home and be like, well, I don't know how we're going to pay the mortgage in a
right,
few weeks. And
of
I was
course,
just
yeah,
living in that place. And I just realized at some point, like, all the worry, all the stress didn't make anything change, and it
sure,
didn't make anything better. In fact, it probably hurt me, hurt
yeah,
my work, hurt
yeah,
my spirit,
yeah,
um, and all that. So I am right now just beyond crazy busy.
yeah,
Um, I'm doing a mural locally. I have ink pulp instruction, which has become a big undertaking, and
yeah,
I'm happy that it has.
mhm,
And I've got the podcast. I've just got things everywhere. I'm really on top of social media now. I've learned how to use it better.
mm,
I've learned how
mm,
to enjoy using it instead of dreading using it.
right, right,
Um, so what I've learned is, under all this pressure and with all these things going on, I've learned to enjoy it. So, like, when I'm working on the mural in the mornings before the restaurant opens, it's like I'm creating a piece of artwork that's 12 feet tall and 8 feet
yeah,
wide,
yeah,
and I'm using my whole body to paint with, and
right,
that's just been a lot of fun. And so I'm finding joy coming back into my life. I'm finding, like, I've got this healthier mindset, and
sure,
I look back at how I've been. I just feel like I was I don't know if I'd call it immature is the wrong word. Naive is probably a better word.
mm.
Um, I don't know, like, if I just lived in a reality in my head that I just was like a child in a grown-up's world, I think, up here.
Yeah, yeah. I don't
And,
know. I mean, like, I think of how we conduct ourselves in that part of our lives. Uh, that's somewhat programmed into us, right? So I make fun of this, but anytime that the needle on the car, as far as the fuel, the gas is concerned, anytime that it gets near quarter tank, I start getting anxiety.
do
And I
you?
think like, where did I get that from? You know, like where do I
Right,
get that
right,
sort of feeling of like, and you talk to anybody, you're like quarter tank of gas. I'll take you. I mean,
yeah,
you've got to turn on a bunch of different systems in order for you to run out of gas in a second
right,
like that.
right.
And I come to recognize it's like for my mom. She'd always thought that. You know, she'd always thought, Eric, we got to
Okay.
go fill up the car
Yeah.
because it's the quarter tank of gas, and I don't want, for whatever reason that she had, I'd always thought, well, that's just how you do things. And you pick those things up and you incorporate it into your conduct, not even realizing that it may not make sense. It's just a thing that's sort of legacied into you, right? So I suspect, I bet good money that natural knee-jerk tendency of yours to worry because you do have bills to pay, you do have a mortgage to pay for, you do like, and now you're worrying whether or not the body of work that your time behind your desk is well spent, not just in paying the bills, but obviously growing as a craftsman and all those kinds of things, right? Like
Yeah.
all of those things get rolled into one, and parts of that is again legacied on. You take that thing on from
You're
something,
absolutely right. It's my dad. It's
Yeah.
all my dad, absolutely. But
Yeah.
what
But
I'm
that's not
trying
blame, right? That's just like identifying. I'm not pointing at your
No,
dad
no,
going
no,
like
no,
it's your
no.
dad's fault.
I'm
I'm looking
absolutely
at it going like,
identifying, but he
yeah,
lived in fear of money always, but we had money growing up. I mean, maybe
sure.
when I was little we didn't, but so I still don't have like financial comfort, but I'm wondering if like by shifting my mindset, does that make things change? Like, I'm really into this idea of attracting and manifesting. Like, you operate on different frequencies, and I
Sure.
would always operate on a low frequency.
Yeah.
And so I'd attract lower frequency things. So operating on
Mm-hmm.
a higher frequency, am I attracting higher frequency things? And
Yeah, sure.
and it seems to be so far that shifting that up here
Yeah.
is working or about to work, I
Yeah.
should say. Another
Yeah.
thing I'm working on is I'm like I went to um there's an Atlanta a gallery downtown um that's owned by an artist who I really like. And I have a lot of love for like juxtapose and the art scene that encompasses.
Sure. Sure.
And I come from that in a lot of ways. It's very different than comic book art. It's very different than I mean, I guess it is fine art, but than more traditional Renaissance valued art. It's more
Yep.
modern,
Yep.
blah blah blah. So there's a gallery downtown. The artist that owns it, I really enjoy his work, and he also does murals all over the world, and I love his work. But we went to an opening about a year ago there, and it was just really inspiring to be in that space and see all this work from all these different artists around the world.
Mm.
And I said, I wonder what I'd have to do to get into this gallery. And
Yeah. Yeah.
I said to myself, I'm gonna get in this gallery. So
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
introduced myself to the gallery manager. And then when I got home, I emailed him and just sort of put my intention out there like this is who I am, this is where I come from, here's
Yeah.
some of my work. I would love
Yeah.
to get into the gallery, and now I'm in it.
Good.
So yeah, I'm just thinking like shifting the mindset,
Yeah.
and also I creating pulp instruction, and I really put a lot into it. I believe wholeheartedly that all of that my life will be very I do see financial comfort,
Yeah.
uh, hopefully sooner than later, but I see it coming.
Yeah. Yeah. For sure. There's a
But
thing that you said
I
that was
just
that was
go ahead, go ahead.
I was gonna say there's a thing that you said earlier, which is I'd come to experience it just as recently as working on this miniseries, right? Which is I've done multiple interviews, obviously, to hype up the book and make sure that there's awareness for it. And I'm very grateful for each and every single person that's brought me onto their YouTube show, which, by the way, is a resource, is phenomenal, right? I
Yeah,
wish we had this kind of stuff coming up, the sort of outreach that you could have just using this sort of personalized, quote unquote, personalized one-on-one interaction with a potential fan base or a fan base in general, right? Anyway,
right.
one of the questions that comes up is that I've been labeled, and I think I love the idea. I would prefer that people refer to me as this. It's like, oh, Eric, you really work in comics anymore. You're more of a hobbyist, right? And I'm like, I love that idea. I love the idea that I'm a hobbyist in the comic book, and I'm making my own comics, and it's a hobby for me. Because I don't know, I think one of the things I bring up in these interviews is whenever they ask me about my history and why I sort of fell out of it, It's because I started contrasting the thing that I really, really wanted to do for a living from way back in the day, which is like draw comic books. That's all I wanted to draw since graduating from high school, right? Once I knew, and my path kind of led me down there, but I didn't start off there, right?
Right, right,
Drawing the comic books, being involved in the comic book business in whatever capacity that they would have me versus like the business of comic books, right?
right,
Which
right.
I wasn't cut out for. You know what I mean? And I'm not just talking about like the invoicing and the blah blah
I
blah,
know
but
what you mean. The
there's also
politics.
these, we talked about this in the past, but it's worth bringing up again, which is, I was never good with the kind of um, synthetic human interactions, right? I didn't care for it. It didn't land very well with me that I don't know if I'm talking to a person and they were being genuine or they were just talking because this is the kind of talk that they do for everybody. I can't remember who I was talking to recently, but they were saying how they would go from conversation to conversation, and just happened to be that he would just coincidentally tandem with somebody else who he was in the previous conversation with. And so with each group of people, they would almost end up talking about, he would say the same exact lines. You know what I mean? It's like the
And
same sort of like,
he admitted to that, like.
no, not him. He was witnessing it,
Right, right.
right? He
Let me
was,
put a pause on you real quick,
yeah,
because there's a parallel that I think is occurring, and I did want to touch on this with you and I,
yeah,
because this is where I think my naivete
mm,
kicks in. I believed everyone was a friend that acted
sorry,
like a friend, and
sorry,
everyone cared, and like I was like, we'll all help each other, and this will be great. And I remember like doing everything I can to help whoever I wanted, but then when shit
yeah,
got rough for me, like I mean, you were always there. Mateo was always there, but it was very few people, and people who I
yeah,
thought were truly friends just acted like I didn't exist anymore. And so
yeah.
that's when it really crushed my spirit.
I
But
bet.
that's where I feel like I was like a child in a grown-up's world
Yeah,
doing
yeah,
that. So I've kind of come to a similar place as you, and I'm going to come back to you. I don't mean to dominate this, but my dream was to work in comics too since
hmm,
high school,
hmm,
and it took me a long time to realize that my perception of people in the business and the business itself was not at all correct.
yeah,
And so
yeah,
I got very um, bitter, very hurt, very
mm,
angry
mm,
at the industry,
right,
but never the medium. So everything I'm doing right now is to get myself to where you are, where I can produce my own books. But what I'm trying to build is some financial stability, like
yeah, sure,
so that I can have the time to do that. And
yeah,
if that makes me a hobbyist, great. But I also think now that option didn't really exist. It existed, it was just so much harder maybe 10, 15 years ago to go
yeah,
off on your own and be your own business and be your own publisher and all that stuff.
yeah. Well, let's come back to that, right? The point that
Okay.
I was trying to make earlier was that I somehow fell out of love with the comic books business, at least the one that I wanted to get into,
Mhm.
because I couldn't be part of it because I couldn't be successful at it, right?
Well, that's what happened to me
But
too. Yeah.
right, but secondly, because I'd realized that in as much as it was about merit, in as much as it was about like just being able to draw well, there was also a social component to it that I wasn't comfortable with. I didn't particularly care. And you know me, like every show that we ever went to, that I ever hang out at the bar, I freaking went straight to the room, and just
Right,
drew
but
because
I understand that now. I mean,
I know it. All right,
like
so
lately I'm like, "Oh man, I just." Yeah,
yeah,
that
so again, so that sort of bitter aftertaste lingered for a long, long time, and it took me a while to negotiate in my head that I was like, actually, no, and this is really what's important, right? I think for me, building the mechanism to disassociate things from something, right? Because I think like, oh, because of this, it must also be this. Oftentimes, I've come to realize that's probably not true, right? This thing can exist in its pure form and still have me be very appreciative and joyful of it. And then the moment I disassociate it with that, like I unlink it from that bitter aftertaste, I go like, no, this is still good, you know? So
What is
that's
so
what
good?
that's what brought me back to doing comic books again, which is I love drawing, right? And I love
Right,
drawing comics. I love putting a challenge in front of myself that I didn't necessarily understood that I needed to cross or like to go and accomplish. But at its core, I love drawing comics. I am just now in I think, a pretty unique, advantageous position to not have to do it under the terms of somebody else. So to
right,
your point, maybe maybe we could have done this 10 years ago. It would have been a whole lot more heavy lifting.
right,
But
right, right.
sincerely, now there is an opportunity. The opportunity space is so much wider than the tools, right? The utility, the things that are available to guys who want to go and self publish. Again, there's still a barrier to entry. Like oftentimes it's dollar related, right? But
Right.
in as far as making your own comics and getting it in front of people, if that's truly your passion, the ceiling is so much further above your head than it was back when I was trying to break in and trying to like,
Sure.
I don't know, right? Like maybe even self-publish back in it. I would have never had this thought. But also, I never really understood the value, or at the very least, it was not necessarily I didn't understand the value. It was just never in front of me how much more important it is that I invest in myself than invest in the career of it, right?
Yeah.
Not realizing the doing of the thing eventually brings the thing that I want,
Right.
right? So one of the things that I'll use an example that just happened recently with Arcathena. So I was one of the things that I'd come to identify was that the an opportunity space for me to get the kind of customer base trust, that equity that they extend to you, is to somehow narrow the divide between end of campaign and delivery, right? I'd realize, hey, that's something that not many people are really accomplishing right now because they're going down the path of a traditional crowdfunding model, which is 5 pages, 10 pages worth of sample work. They launch the campaign, then they go and end up doing the book based on the money that they raised. Fast forward X amount of months later, and then the book ends up in somebody's hands. And I'm like, I don't know why that's the only way to do it. I think there's a way for me to like really narrow that divide and do the book way ahead of time, right? And by doing so, by like, by saying, okay, I'm going to get a ton of these pages done before I even launch, right?
Yeah.
It really did set up sort of this, um, not necessarily awareness, more like, oh, that's why did nobody else do that, or at least not as why was that not normal? And I'd realize, oh, again, I'm in this advantageous position where I can do that, and it doesn't, the me doing it doesn't suddenly, doesn't impact the way I can keep my lights on in my house, right? That's why the
Right.
hobbyist part comes in. But what had happened was, a company called Zest World, and I'm pretty, enthusiastic to talk about it. A company called Zest World reached out to me behind the scenes, and they are a subscription based digital platform that's going to be handling the distribution for Arc Athena on a subscription level, right? On a tiered subscription level, and they approached me and said, "Hey, is there any way that we can be the people that does this for you? We want to work with you on this thing. We want Arc Athena on our platform." It's
Right.
incredibly flattering. I was like,
This is for
"Whoa, this."
digital distribution.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So yeah, so they approached me and I said, "Whoa, this is really flattering. This is really exciting. We found a way to make it work." And just out of curiosity, I asked the I asked the founder of the company, "How did you find me?" How did you find, like, was it word of mouth? Did you talk to somebody? Was it like, there's a couple people behind the scenes who they've also approached, creators behind the scenes who they've also approached, and I thought, oh, I have an association with that person. I wonder if they had recommended me or whatever it was. And they said, no, not really. We were just on comic book Twitter. And first of all, it made me laugh that there was such a thing as comic book Twitter, right?
Yeah,
It's
I
ridiculous.
mean, I'm the old man, like, I hear all these sub-Twitter titles,
Yeah, yeah,
like,
yeah. Freaking
and I
hilarious
still
to
don't
me.
really understand
Twitter
that,
to
but
me is
okay.
Twitter. You know what I
Right,
mean?
it's all
I look
Twitter.
at it's all Twitter to me. But
Yeah,
I
me
think
too.
what it goes to show is that if you just really, for me again, I think this is my brand of luck, which is I fall ass backwards into every opportunity that I've ever gotten. But it wasn't for the lack of being prepared in that space, right?
Mhm.
So I'd realized, oh, I'm having so much fun, and I think sort of just like whatever it is that's out in the universe understood how much fun I'm having, and people can see it,
That
right?
gets
They
back to what I
see,
was saying.
yeah,
You were like, you were operating at a very high frequency, and you attracted high frequency stuff to you.
sure, sure, yeah. That's
That's
a
how
great way
I
of
see it.
looking at it.
Yeah.
That's a great way of looking at it. I mean, it's some of the most fun work that I've done. I can't even remember when. I think what really keyed me into, hey, wait, this is fun. I don't know why I had such a apprehensive attitude towards this. Was working with is it? He never corrects me, so I say Millar. People say Miller, but
I don't know.
Mark Millar, right? I say
Yeah.
Millar until he corrects me. I'm not going to change it, right?
Right.
So, working with Mark on that mini series for Miller World.
Yeah.
Anyway, working with him on that started sort of the avalanche, to make me go, right, this is fun. And it's because Mark is just saying, do whatever the heck you want. Here's a script. And I trust you
Right.
as a creator, sort of my comrade in arms, so to speak, right? Like my collaborator to go and execute at a certain level. There's a couple times, actually, no, I can count on one time when he stepped in and said, hey, we need to have this one panel. But 99.9% of the time, he just said, do the thing that makes you happy. Do the thing that got you the job in the first place. And I was like, whoa, this can happen,
Yeah, yeah, it's crazy that that is not the default anymore
Yeah,
in comics. It
sure,
kind of used to be the default in
sure,
comics, and
sure.
that's one of the things that really, like, I kinda dig my heels in on things and just I'll suffer through anything if I just have committed to it.
Yeah, sure.
But I just the last few years of working freelance were just absolutely miserable because
Mm,
every
mm,
script I got was just an absolute disaster. There was no room to do what like, when I get a script, like, if it's a good script, then you have room to be a storyteller.
right,
If it's a
right.
horrible script, then you have to fix it, and
Yeah,
then
yeah,
you can then come in and be the storyteller. But if you're under
right,
deadlines, like, all my I would just felt like my job became make this work,
right.
and, just the writers would celebrate all the successes, and their scripts were terrible. The whole craft of writing, it felt like to me, was just dwindling.
Mm,
And I
mm,
just like, every script I got was just like, it got to the point where, like, I used to love doing thumbnails, like,
right.
figuring out the storytelling, compositions,
Sure,
and
sure.
all that, and, like, seeing it come to life, but then it just became so much work.
Yeah,
I mean, I
yeah,
remember working from David Lapham's scripts where it stopped feeling like work. It was like, "Oh,
mm,
like, it's all there, now I can tell a
yeah,
story."
yeah,
And so that really just I mean, I stuck with it when I
yeah.
probably shouldn't have.
I mean, it's not too dissimilar to what I went through, although I don't know if I went through the grinder like you just described now. I just realized that the stuff that I was going after wasn't becoming as fulfilling as I thought it was. There was a picture in my head.
Yeah,
It was the way
yeah,
that was being executed, and I immediately, because I lacked the maturity to understand the situation, I immediately pointed at the publisher and say, "Oh my gosh, why is this stuff not very good? Why are you guys not understanding?" Blah blah. Like I pointed a lot of fingers in their direction. Fast forward to now, and I look and I go like, you know, I I understand why they're doing what they're doing. It must be a very difficult it must be a very difficult industry to maintain because number one, you don't have the right personnel to do it. Not even on the like that's the part that really puzzles me whenever it comes to, a fan base pointing at the creatives, right? The public facing versions of these titles, these efforts. And I'm like, they're not the ones you should be, forwarding your issues to. It should be leadership,
Right.
I'd come to in my maturation process of understanding how organizations work and how creative endeavors work. You have to populate, not just middle management but upper management to be like, this is the standard that we're going to hold ourselves accountable to because it trickles down from us. And when you don't have a standard bearer, when you don't have sort of the point of reference of what excellence looks like, right? Everything gets disseminated from that person, right? And it just gets homogenized to whatever it is that the books end up becoming. So if there's any sort of, if you have a gripe, if you have an issue of how books are being written, how they're distributed, or how they conduct themselves publicly in these social media platforms, I don't look at them. I'm all like, oh, that's who you hired. It reflects poorly on your company, on your brand, and on your title, and on your creative efforts. But then I would go like, who's in charge over there? Which is
Yeah.
always
Well,
perplexing to me. And it's clear, it's not a difficult question to answer. So anyway, so I go down that emotional path of getting irate, of rolling my eyes and going like, why the heck is that guy being put in charge of these books? Why are these people messing it up? And then I'm like, I'm too old for that shit, you know?
yeah, 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 yeah,
Like
yeah, yeah,
I
I
get
get
to a
that.
point where I'm like, I get perplexed, I get annoyed because I do have an affinity for the mainstream. That's my upbringing, that's my childhood.
Sure.
But then I realize like, you know, screw that shit. That's not up to me, right? It's
Right,
I'm
right. That
I'm
was
not getting mad. I'm not about to spend any more time
exactly, exactly.
trying to figure out why they put themselves in that position because that's not my business. If they were to
Right,
bring me in and ask me, hey, what do you think of this? Then obviously I'll spend a ton of energy trying to figure that out. But right
right,
now, like you said, you're busy with easily 4 or 5 things at any given time. Why
right.
am I going to give
Well,
any of that time getting annoyed at something that I have no business in outside of just like, in an ancillary way, sort of on the outside window looking in,
sure.
right?
And
So
I mean, I'm this busy now because I stopped putting my energies into that, what you were just
absolutely.
talking about. I mean,
Yeah.
like, I think about all the energy I spent, like, getting upset and angry and bitter, and like it just lowered all of my frequencies
Yeah.
down low, and I was
Yeah.
just operating from a really bad place. But
Yeah.
you're right, just turning it off and be like,
Yeah.
"That's them. Let me do me, and
Right.
let me
Right.
build my things,
Right.
and then I don't even need to, like, I don't know what's going on in that world at all anymore." I mean, you
I
used to
do.
always come to me asking me like, "Shawn, so what's going on in the comics world?" And I
Right.
knew everything. I could tell you everything. And
Right. Right. Right.
now I don't know, and I don't really care to know.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm
But
just
it's,
busy doing what I'm
I
doing.
get it. I invest just as much as my expectation out of it. I invest into like, yeah, I know what's happening over there. This event is happening, these characters are this way, like all of those things. But that is as far as I go. It's just having an eye roll. If it's eye rolling, then I give myself the 2 minutes to do it. If it's celebratory, I give myself the 2 minutes to do it because my day is populated with stuff that I can actually do something about. I can't
Right,
do anything about that,
right,
right?
exactly,
So,
exactly.
in the span of any given 24-hour day, I have X amount of time, X amount of hours to
Yeah,
dedicate to my work. But then I have to find that really delicate work life balance, and I'd rather not spend any more of it sort of giving my time, energy, and thought to something that doesn't even reciprocate. So
right, right.
I'm out of
And
that. I try to get out of there.
in fact, we're coming up on an hour, but I think you're like, if we're ending it, that's a good place to end it and a good place to pick up next time.
Yeah,
Work life balance.
yeah, that's
Because I
awesome.
have questions for you on that. Because I mean, I'm doing it better than I ever have, but you're still able to do it, produce a mini series while having a job, 2 young kids, and your family. And
Yeah,
so that's something I would love to dive into on the
for next
next
time.
one.
Yeah,
So how did we do today?
I think we did all right.
Yeah, I
I
thought
think
it
there
was
was a couple.
good.
I mean, I laugh because I think when people hear like, oh, the Canete and Shawn are going to talk craft, the immediate knee jerk is to be like, how do you draw perspective,
Right.
and
Eric,
while
that's what
that
INKPULP instruction is for. They can go get that video.
well, go to that.com and get your instruction on how to draw that in perspective. But craft is ultimately not just the technical aspect of it too, but it's like
Right.
the lived experience of what it means to be working in an industry, and at this point graduating into a space where, at least for me anyway, I don't want to speak for you, but it sounds like it's something similar. Have appreciation for where we come from, but not getting, hamstrung by all the issues that we used to have with it, and just be like, we're just gonna
Absolutely.
go do our own thing, man.
Absolutely. And we will. I mean, look, I do have episodes where I am going to want to talk, like, maybe not perspective, but I already have like I wanted to ask you about storytelling at some time and directing action sequences and stuff
Sure,
like that. So
let's do that.
I do want to get into that too. So
Yeah,
we'll cover it all.
yeah. We'll sprinkle this into those. Hey, how do you set up a shot? Kind of questions.
Right. Okay. So do we have a sign off? Like, do we have like an official?
I
Like,
think we'll figure it
here
out.
we go.
It will. I'm not going to do that.
Go on.
I'm 0% of that. I'm not doing that.
All right. Well, thank you, Eric. This was fun.
Yeah.
Yeah, I hope everyone enjoyed. This is the first, and
Yeah.
we have more coming.
Yes, sir.
All right. So I'm gonna hit end broadcast now because that's how you end it. But hang out, Eric, for 1 second.
Boy.
This is the INKPULP podcast. This is the INKPULP podcast. Comics, hip hop, life.